rate set by the Central Bank of Kenya, banks and other critics of the law tore into it as being populist and set to hurt those whom it sought to protect, and the government and its proponents say that the time had come to tame cartel-like behavior in the banking sector and to force them to offer realistic interest rates to their clients. Indeed, it had been noticed that the spread of profits for certain banks was skewed dangerously to income from interest rates, even as they justified the high rates charged as commensurate to the high risk they took on in offering loans to less reputable clients. A half-year evaluation is now due, and we want to know how the banks have fared under this new regime. And of course, before we hear from Dr. James Mwangi, CEO of Equity, a little bit of your feedback already coming in. Someone here is saying, my bank is Equity, I can't access a loan, my business is almost closing, I think the cap is not helping the common mwananchi. Someone else here is saying, why are they charging 14% instead of 12%? Someone else, you're not leaving your names, please leave your names and your location, is saying, some banks have not effected the change as it was expected of them. I still pay as much as I used to pay before the cap, and for the period I was used to, Kenyans are being cheated. So obviously still a bit contentious. Dr. James Mwangi, CEO of Equity Bank, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, we'll get into those in just a moment, but it's been, 5 months down the line. What is Equity Bank's particular experience and how is the bank coping?
I think one is to say that since the date the law was enacted or became law, banks complied both to the letter and the spirit. But of course, every decision has outcomes. And what we have started seeing is, like the president predicted when he was signing the act, the consequences of that decision. And it's like what Kenyans are making observation, the IMF has made, the government itself, that credit growth in the country has shrunk. Last year, but one, credit had grown by nearly 25%. Last year, simply because of those 3 months, credit shrunk below zero. Essentially, there was no growth. And this is happening when the economy is growing at 6%. So huge opportunities are being lost to FAD. But basically, there is nothing wrong with capping interest rates. The problem and the contention is on how it was done. Okay. It was done in a way that is difficult to operationalize that in a market environment. Yeah. And that's really, and we are hoping that the government, as it promised, will review and create mechanisms that would favor Kenyans.
Right, and you could also talk a little bit about some of your customers, like one of the people here. What are they saying? What are you hearing from them as well?
I think basically what we are saying is that the way the capping was done, it was capped at a level at the same rate at risk-free government treasury board earnings. The government treasury bills for the same period of 180 days is 12%, 12.5%.
Right.
So essentially, when you then say risk rating is at 14 and you make general provision, you are left with 13. So essentially, the choice that was made was to skew the market towards funding public debt. And essentially that's what has happened in the market, leaving the private sector squeezed of credit.
Yeah.
Essentially we need to change the parameters to achieve the objective. But we now achieved an objective that we never intended to.
Right.
Why? Because the structure that was used was not optimal.
Right, and was the challenge. What are some of the adverse effects of the interest rate controls? And could they potentially pose a risk to financial stability, in your opinion, especially in the long run?
I think the biggest impact is not in the banking industry. It's the ramification in the economy. Banks facilitate the economy to be in motion. And now what we have done is to disconnect the public sector, which the government is still pumping a lot of money, and the private sector, which is supposed to provide the value chain to these investments. That value chain connection, that is what is being disconnected. And essentially when the economy is disconnected, then we start seeing consequences, not just to the banking, but all the other sectors. As like somebody said there, they're not able to get their own, and their business is about to close. When that business closes, then people who are employed in that business are out. The government that was receiving tax ceases to receive tax. So it is, you create value, a chain reaction within the economy that is adverse. But given that this is a law that we made ourselves, I'm sure wisdom will prevail, and we'll review the law so that it achieves the objective for which it was intended.
Right, favorable, and obviously doesn't continue to, you know, chase away or upset a lot of the clients who are talking to us today. Here's a question that someone is asking: aren't small banks then over-reliant on this one product, which is interest rates, instead of introducing a robust array of interesting products for clientele? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it takes quite amount of time to change business models. Well, the recommendation is solid that yes, banks can move away from lending, but then once you move away from lending, you impair the economy. The private sector is impaired. To change and stabilize a business model so that you move from interest to transaction fees. And again, let me tell Kenyans that the central bank refused to approve any increase on fees. So the banks have not adjusted fees. And as you said, that the biggest challenge with the banks is the economic return on capital. And the question is, will allocation of resources continue to the banking industry? If you look, the banking industry is now trading at half the market price. It was trading at Nairobi Stock Exchange. The people who have really suffered most are the people who held the shares of the banking industry. Those are the people we have punished. And then we have punished the people who are not able to get through. And that is why I was saying this law never achieved the intended objective and needs to be reviewed in light of that so that we get a mechanism that achieves objective.
Do you have any timelines for that, or is it just still a work in progress?
I think we don't need to wait until the consequences are very adverse. We need to say, yes, we have fast evidence, it's not working. Why don't we tweak? Why don't we adjust? And we are lucky that in the next 1 or 2 months we will have finance bill. So really the government can work together with the parliament and amend the law, not necessarily through the act, but through the finance bill, so that once it's passed, then the economy is back. If you look at IMF, it has predicted the economy will lose a momentum of 2% growth rate. Moving from 6% to 4%, then starts again. It will take another 3 years or 4 to recover
that again.
Recover that. So that's why we are saying early decision, quick decision would be appropriate to give Kenyans what. I think we had, yes, a problem of interest were high, but credit was available. People were able to educate their children. People were able to carry on their businesses. Now what we have done is to shut the tap. Nothing is flowing.
Okay. Noted. Thank you for that. And thank you for that closing remark there, that there's an urgency. It doesn't have to get to a point where it's beyond control. Dr. James Mwangi.
Yes, when you feel unwell, you go to see a doctor.
You don't wait until you're on your last leg.
Absolutely.
All right. Dr. James Mwangi, CEO of Equity Bank. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this break.